What's up guys, welcome to the new channel. I finally got some new recording equipment, so hopefully these are going to be a little bit more professional for you guys. To be completely honest, I've been stressing myself out so much trying to make these videos, trying to be as perfect as possible. But I think I've kind of realized that my role is to kind of accept that I never really feel like I know what I'm doing, but hopefully in this video you guys can pull away something that will really help you. So recently somebody asked me if I could remake Tyven by 7 Lions. So I went about creating it and I came away with a few really good things that I think I can share with you guys. So in this video, I want to give you 5 things that can really help you to match 7 Lions' super sauce stacks. Just getting all the levels right and the balance right of everything. So the hope is that after this video, you'll be able to make something that's a little bit less like this, and be able to create a mix that sounds a little bit more like this. So we know that this is some sort of super saw that is playing. So naturally we would go about creating a super saw. We have a saw wave, we would stack some voices here. Maybe we would even throw in this square wave oscillator with some more voices. Let's see what that sounds like. We could try to make it even more lush or even more professional with some dimension and some chorus. Okay, so it sounds like a super saw, but let's play it with the entire arrangement. It's definitely closer to what we want to get, but something's not right. So you can hear how it just sounds like these saws are sitting over the top of our bass, and it doesn't really sound like we have a pretty professional mix going on. And what I found from remaking this track along with a bunch of other tracks is that these super saws are actually so much thinner than you think they are. They really don't take up too much of the spectrum. The saws serve more of a purpose of giving this melodic feel over the top, but sonically they actually don't take up the majority of the spectrum. So let's just go through the chain of processing that I went through when remaking this track. So the first tip for you guys is we're going to use some distortion for this, but we're going to use a pre-high pass filter to start thinning those saws out. So let's throw on some distortion here and turn on this pre-filter. This slider is at the high pass, and you can see that I'm cutting it off around 593 Hertz. And then I dialed in the drive and the mix until I started feeling a thinning of the saws and a more washed out high end. So let's see how that sounds. You can hear now that this thinning is already helping to mix the saws in with the bass. The distortion is also smoothing out those higher frequencies and giving them a more textured high end. The importance of this pre-high pass is twofold. We are getting a thinning of the saws in the low end by cutting off some of those lower frequencies, and we'll talk about this more later. But this high pass is also telling the distortion which harmonics to distort. Because we're cutting out these low harmonics, the distortion unit is only going to be creating extra harmonics based on these higher frequencies. Because we are distorting these higher frequencies and not the lower, we are getting less tonal harmonics and more noisy harmonics. This helps to wash out that high end with some extra noise, which is starting to help us to get that bigger feel. Now let's see what this sounds like with the entire progression. So the second tip that you guys have probably already heard a million times is to add white noise to the super saws. But usually when I hear this tip, it's very basic. You just hear people say throw some white noise on it. And yeah, it does brighten up the sound, but a professional way to do it, it doesn't just have white noise splattered on top of it. What I've found from remaking this track and lots of other tracks, deadmau5 tracks, Porter Robinson tracks, is that these type of super saws, that noise in the high end is deliberately placed, and it's placed in such a way that the higher frequencies from the synth itself, the oscillators, will gradually die away into the noise. So the very highest end of the spectrum is actually just noise and not any of those harmonics. But we want to create this very intentional and gradual fading away of the harmonics from the oscillators into this noise. And it just gives this effect that the higher frequencies are getting lost in this big space that we're creating with the noise. So the second tip for you guys is to throw some white noise on there, but we're also going to shape it properly so the harmonics and the noise are gelling perfectly. So let's turn on our white noise oscillator. I chose the pink noise because I like the thickness of it, but pay attention to the low rumble we get when we play this. We still want to have that thin low end in the supersaws, so we need to cut this low end of the noise out. So let's put our noise through this high pass filter. I chose this high pass EQ, and I also decided to throw my square oscillator into this just for some extra thinning. So we have this nice bright white top end to this. Now, the key to white noise in supersaws, at least in my opinion, is that it sounds like our higher frequencies are mostly washed out noise. I don't want to hear the harshness of the synth high frequencies. I want it to feel like it's kind of fading into just noise. So the level of our noise oscillator is really important here. If I have it too low, we can still hear some of the harshness from our oscillators. Now, the reason that noise tames those harsh frequencies is because our ear in the high end has trouble picking out those individual harmonics. So if you fill in areas in between the harmonics, our ears begin to lose those individual harmonics and it begins to feel smoother and more washed out. An added bonus to this is that our noise is also going through this distortion unit. So we're getting some extra distorted harmonics from this noise, which is just further helping to get this high end nice and bright, but washed out. Again, if we play this with the entire progression, so it's already starting to get a lot closer than what it was if we just had a plain supersaw. But the third tip that I have for you guys, it relates to what we did in the first tip when we were trying to thin out those saws. Every single one of us has heard about trying to create a big wall of sound, like that's how you make a really impactful electronic track. And yes, this is true, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of people forget the fact that we want it sonically to be big, like a lot of harmonics filling up the spectrum from low to high. But we also want the space that we're creating to appear really massive. So how do we do this? We want to make our sounds feel like they're in a very large space. So one thing we can do to accomplish this is to make the saws themselves feel like they're farther away. So the third tip for you guys is to use some EQ and especially some side EQ to create this effect that the saws are coming from a much larger space. Things that feel closer to us will usually have more low harmonics and higher harmonics, and sounds that are heavily in the sides will also appear more in your face. So I want our sound to feel like it's a little farther back. I want it to feel like it's in a massive space. So in these EQs, what I've done is taken out some of these low harmonics and high harmonics. And the next thing that I did is I used this side EQ to take out the lows in the sides. So we're kind of centering that lower portion, and it just makes it feel like the sound is coming from this far away place, a little bit more in the center from the low area. And if I place a reverb on this, you can hear how the effect is emphasized. So this next bit of processing that I have for you guys was just something that I came across when I was referencing this track really closely. When I was analyzing the levels that Seven Lions had in this track, I noticed an odd thing that I've never really seen before, but it goes to show you that mid and side processing is really important, and I think it can really create some more professional spaces and some more realistic spaces in your music. This fourth tip for you guys is a little bit different, but what we're gonna do is take out some of that presence region, like that 1 to 2K region from the mid channel, and we're actually gonna boost it in the side channel. And you'll hear that after we do this, the effect is that the saws just feel like they're really well mixed in with the bass and the rest of the track. So to get this technique dialed in, what I did is in my mid EQ, I pulled out some of this 1K region, 1 to 2K, which is going to be more of the presence area of these super saws. And in the sides, I kind of boosted the same area. And then I finally rolled off some of those very high frequencies in the mids and sides just to get closer to where Seven Lions levels were. But you can hear how big of an effect this is. Let's start playing it without it on. And with it on. It's a very pleasant feeling in the sides of your ears. And if we play this with our entire progression, it just really feels like it's mixed in well. So let me quickly put on a Voxen Go MSCD plugin, and let's just listen to what the mids sound like if I turn this on and off. So you can hear we're getting this extra emphasis on the noise in this mono signal. Now if we solo the sides, it's a very interesting way to split up the side and mid content in a sound, but it just goes to show that you can do some interesting mid-side EQ to create some pleasant and innovative results. So in this last one, guys, what we're actually gonna go ahead and do is address some of the bass sound design. I think it's pretty common as a beginning producer or even an intermediate producer to just create a bass to throw in with your super saw stack. So we usually find a bass that covers like the sub into the low mids pretty well, and we think that it's kind of thick, it kind of matches what's going on over the top. So we think at that point that, you know, we're good. But I'd say that one of the major findings that I've had over the past year and a half or so of doing this channel is that the use of additional bass sounds is very common in professional producers' work. And specifically what I'm talking about is the concept of the mid bass. In my last video, I talked about a mid bass sound that deadmau5 had in his remix of Calvin Harris's I'm Not Alone. And these mid basses actually provide a great way to fill up some of that low mid energy just to thicken up your track. And they also are very helpful in making your track feel more alive, more energetic, like it's moving forward. And as long as you put this mid bass in there and it's not bleeding over into your sub or very lows too much, you can really play around with this to create some extra texture in your work. And if you're a fan of Seven Lions, you know that he has a ton of basses in there. Any like complextro genre will just have a bunch of these mid basses thrown in there. So this fifth and last tip, guys, what we're gonna do is add an additional kind of textured mid bass in this track, and it just really helps to fill out the space and fill in that kind of like mid area that we carved out by thinning those saws out. Now we're gonna fill that space up with this mid bass sound. So normally when trying to create a bass section for your song, you would just try to get something that is filling out your low end pretty solidly. I think a lot of producers focus on the sub a little bit too much, but here's what our bass sounds like without this extra mid bass that we're gonna add. So it sounds pretty good. It seems like it has a nice high ends. If we play this with the entire beat, So it sounds pretty decent, but it seems to be lacking that professional glow. We just need a little something extra, like a little secret sauce to make this feel like a professional track, make it feel like it has some extra energy. And that's what the role of this mid bass is. If I just play this in solo, this is helping to fill out kind of that lower mid area. And it also has this very nice texture to it. So the way that I went about creating this, it's pretty much just an FM bass sound. And I chose some wavetables that would help me to get some of that grittiness. And then I'm using this LFO to automate some of the cutoff. So we're getting an opening up of the sound at certain points in the progression. And then I did a similar thing as we talked about in the super saws, where I'm cutting off the low ends in the harmonics, and then we're distorting it just to get some more of that grit. But let's hear this with our basses all together. It just feels like we're missing something if we don't have this here. There's this gap in the frequency range and this gap in energy that we're trying to fill. That alone is a little bit too static. But with this extra mid bass, it's creating movement, it's creating some extra texture, some extra energy, and it just overall feels more interesting. So again, if we play this all together, so I hope this one really helped you out, guys. I know it can feel super overwhelming to recreate something that sounds as thick and as massive as this, but these little things really do make a huge difference. Now, there were so many extra sounds that I had to recreate for this track. There's just too much to go through in one video. But if you think you can really learn more from what's going on in this mix, I have this project uploaded on my Patreon right now. So if you'd like to check it out, head over to patreon.com/Ryan Kossoff. There are a ton of extra projects up there at the moment, and for just $10 a month, you get access to every single project file that I've created. So if you guys liked what you saw in this video, the best way to support me is on the Patreon. And it's actually the only way to support me at the moment. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please keep producing, please keep learning. It is possible, we just have to keep on going. So I will see you guys in the next video.